Thomas and Trevor. Trevor the traction engine enjoys living in the vicarage orchard on the island of Sodor. Edward the blue engine once helped to save him from being turned into scrap, so now Trevor lives at the vicarage and the two engines are great friends. Edward comes to see Trevor every day. Sometimes Trevor is sad because he doesn't have enough work to do. "I do like to keep busy all the time," Trevor sighed one day. "And I do like company, especially children's company." "Cheer up," smiled Edward. "The Fat Controller has work for you at his new harbour. I'm to take you to meet Thomas today." "Oh!" exclaimed Trevor happily. "A harbour! The seaside! Children! That will be lovely." Trevor's truck was coupled behind Edward, and they set off to meet Thomas. Thomas was making his way to the harbour with a trainload of metal pilings. They were needed to make the harbour wall firm and safe. "Hello, Thomas," said Edward. "This is Trevor, a friend of mine. He's a traction engine." Thomas eyed the newcomer doubtfully. "A what engine?" he asked. "A traction engine," explained Trevor. "I run on roads instead of rails. Can you take me to the harbour, please? The Fat Controller has a job for me." "Of course," replied Thomas, but he was still puzzled. Workmen coupled Trevor's truck to Thomas's train, and soon they were ready to start their journey. I'm glad the Fat Controller needs me," called Trevor. "I don't have enough to do sometimes, although I can work anywhere. In orchards, on farms, in scrapyards, even at harbours." "But you don't run on rails," puffed Thomas. "I'm a traction engine. I don't need rails to be useful," replied Trevor. "You wait and see." When they reached the harbour, they found everything in confusion. Trucks had been derailed, blocking the line, and stone slabs lay everywhere. "We must get these pilings through," said Thomas's driver. "They are essential. Trevor," he said, "we need you to drag them round this mess." Exactly the sort of job I like," replied Trevor happily. "Now you'll see, Thomas. I'll soon show you what traction engines can do." Trevor was as good as his word. First he dragged the stones clear with chains, then he towed the pilings into position. "Who needs rails?" he muttered cheerfully to himself. Later, Thomas brought his two coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, to visit Trevor. Thomas was most impressed. "Now I understand how useful a traction engine can be," he said. Thomas's coaches were full of children, and Trevor gave them rides along the harbour. Of all the jobs he did at the harbour that day, he liked this best of all. "He's very kind," Annie remarked. "He reminds me of Thomas," added Clarabelle. Everyone was sorry when it was time for Trevor to go. Thomas pulled him along the line to the junction. A small tear came into Trevor's eye. Thomas pretended not to see and whistled gaily to try to make Trevor feel happy. "I'll come and see you as often as I can," Thomas promised. "The vicar will look after you, and there's plenty of work for you now at the orchard. But we may need you again at the harbour someday." "That would be wonderful," said Trevor happily. That evening, Trevor stood in the orchard, remembering his new friend Thomas, the harbour, and most of all, the children. Then he went happily to sleep in the shed at the bottom of the orchard.